Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sunday stream. How is everyone doing today? I'm glad that all of you are here on this wonderful Sunday, May 9th, 2021. It's Mother's Day, so if you haven't spent time with your moms this weekend, you haven't called them, you haven't seen them, I hope that you have. I know that we did for us. Our family took our mother out yesterday afternoon, so we were definitely looking forward to that good time. It was nice. We went out. Of course, all the restaurants are packed because lockdowns are ending here in Texas. So, I mean, the wait time just to get into a restaurant was ridiculously long. But I mean, it was good to see her while everyone was here. The whole family was together, which was nice. So, like I said, if you haven't called your mother and wished them a happy Mother's Day, I would behoove you to do so and move you to go for it. All right, then. While we wait for everyone to pour on in and get our numbers going, we will do the usual part of the show at the beginning, which is, of course, chat and channel updates and announcements. So, yeah, for not everyone, I know it's not Mother's Day for everybody, but here in the US it is. So for my American audience, by all means, call your moms, tell them that you love them, because your relationship with your parents is precious. So the older you get, the more you're going to appreciate it. I guarantee it. But yeah, so some channel updates and sort of just a review of the week, because I like taking the time to let you guys know how I'm doing, how the channel's doing, and what I've got in the pipeline. So it's been a good month so far for May. Since the last time that we spoke, we've had our ability to get things started on the monetization front. My application was approved, so they'll be mailing me that pin form and everything to get started. So one day, just one day, super chats might just be a thing on this channel. Who knows? Although it has been fun dealing with the wonderful aspect of ad suitability. The last video I uploaded, it took like 25 extra minutes just for them to do ad checks, and I have a feeling it's because the channel is political in nature. So who knows? We'll see in the future how that works out. And then, of course, we've been very busy with May 1st. We had Prudent Reads and with R. and McIntyre. If you haven't seen that one, you should go check it out. We talked about Volume 1 of Spangler's Decline to the West. And then I did a backer suggested video. So if you're not a backer on Subscribestar, I recommend that you are, because you'll have the opportunity to suggest video content and video suggestions to me, so you can see what you want to put your money towards, what ideas that you want to hear about. We can go for it. Gabe, actually, it's not a China-related project. The Chinese definitely support it, and they've provided some funding, but it is not a China-related project at all. In fact, the principal contractor for this dam that we'll be talking about later is from the Italians. But I'll get into that in just a minute. But yeah, Michael, hello. Archie, hello. It's the 14th in the UK. Yeah, it's on the 9th here in the US. And then I guess it depends everywhere else in the world. Michael is getting cozy with some brie, parma ham. Looking forward to learning about Ethiopia. Well, I'm glad that you're all here and cozy, because that's what I'm doing. I've got my cup of coffee. I'm enjoying that afternoon perk up of caffeine. And yeah, I'm ready to go when you guys are. The other announcements that I do have is on the 29th of this month, so 20 days, so less than 3 weeks from now, I will have Mr. Patriarch on, and we will be doing yet another Prudent Reads. So Prudent Reads is a double feature this month, and we will be talking about Mr. Machiavelli's The Prince. He's been doing a few videos on that. So if you're not subscribed to Mr. Patriarch or watching his videos on The Prince, I highly recommend it. There'll be a great primer for our discussion on, one of the most important and influential books of political statecraft in recent memory. But yeah, this is where we're at, the Prudent Sunday vibe. And you're in for a special treat, because I've changed frog facts a little bit at the end. I'm not going to let you know what that is, but it is at the end of the show, as always. So with that being said, let me load up our presentation, and we will get started. So let me get my share screen going. And here we go. So I decided today that we would be talking about, in the past, I know that we've talked a lot about more European or sort of Western-centric affairs or more grander scale topics, whether it's about international relations, great power politics, but a lot of it focuses, of course, on the greater powers. So we've been focusing a lot on China, we've been focusing a lot on the United States, we've been focusing on Russia. So I thought it would be important to diversify our perspectives and to diversify our understanding of international affairs by focusing on what to many of us might seem like rather a niche or obscure topic, but these things play a major role in how minor regional and small hegemonic issues can play towards a larger role in the international community and can get other powers involved. And so the subject for today's discussion has been an issue that's been going on now for about 10 years in terms of political disputes, and that is the Grand Renaissance Ethiopian Dam, also known as GERDS, not the acid reflux problem, although it has the same acronym. GERDS is about a dam that has been proposed and surveyed for decades now and is finally nearing the completion of its construction, which is causing significant political disputes between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, which of course has already dragged in numerous powers involving in this sort of three-way dispute. It's dragged in the United States, it's dragged in members of sort of Italian and Chinese interests, it's dragged in the United States and other members of the African and European Unions, respectively. It is a significant cause for concern, and every few years or so, as the dam gets closer and closer to completion, and in fact, it is now at a point where it can start collecting water and filling up the part of the dam necessary in order for it to start, producing energy. You'll see the occasional article, either in NPR or Foreign Policy magazine, where it talks about the likelihood of war. And this is why I think it's important for us to talk about today, because, of course, the Nile is, the source of all life, essentially, for Egypt's economy, its agricultural sector, the livelihood of roughly 100 million people. And to the Egyptians, they see this as an existential threat because this dam, is a part of the tributary Blue Nile system, and I'll have a map for you all to look at in just a minute. And they, of course, see this as an existential threat. Anything that could reduce access or the flow of water, of course, is going to be significantly harmful to the Egyptian economy. For decades, the Egyptians have had more or less the de facto sovereignty on regulating the Nile. And now there's, a political, economic, and strategic challenge to that authority. So we're going to take a look at that today, take a look at the history, take a look at the dam itself, talk about implications, then, of course, talk about the greater concept of water hegemony. So with that being said, I'm going to start diving into our conversation. And so here we go. All right, so this is the map that I was talking about. This is the Grand Renaissance Ethiopian Dam. It's also known as the Millennial Dam, or GERD, in many foreign policy circles. Now, this site that we see here, the little red square, this was originally identified back in the 60s and 70s from the United States Bureau of Reclamation during the Blue Nile survey. Of course, this was originally proposed to be a dam for hydroelectric plants and just to have water collection for Ethiopia. But of course, during the 1970s, when the socialist coup d'etat military junta took over, also known as the Derg, the project was put on hold. It wouldn't be until a democratic system of government gets put back in place in the 1990s where the project is discussed again. Surveys wouldn't even resume until I think around 2010, I believe. And the first work begins in 2011 to start actually building the dam. Now, a majority of the dam, of course, is funded primarily by government bonds. There are quite a few stories where it'll tell you that a lot of college students that are studying in Ethiopia, they put a lot of their money towards this, a lot of public fundraising projects and bond projects, similar to war bonds projects in the United States during World War II, have been used to fund this project, along with private donations from benefactors, some European and Chinese donors as well from state-owned enterprises and such. However, this project is seen very similarly to I think it's the Aswan Dam of the Egyptians back in the 1960s. It's a source of national pride. there is a sense that this project is going to be, the shining crown jewel of architectural, engineering, political, and technical expertise of the Ethiopians, and allowing them to assert themselves on the world stage. There's a lot of sense of national pride behind this dam. But it's meant to be a source for hydroelectricity. It's meant to be a source for water collection. It is meant to meet the needs of the Ethiopian people. However, as you can tell on the map, that this leads to the Blue Nile tributary, which contributes, of course, to the Nile River, which provides the lifeblood to the Egyptian economy and access to agriculture, trade, and so on for the Egyptian people. And of course, that's 100 million people living in Egypt that would be, dependent upon any sort of change in the flow and access to the Nile. Of course, it's going to impact their economy. And of course, livelihood, agricultural, shortage supplies, the likelihood of droughts. There are significant factors and information that have not been publicly released yet, which makes it all the more concerning. And because Ethiopia and Egypt haven't necessarily released all this information, despite being privy to numerous third-party studies that they've worked on together, it only leads to more political tension. In fact, that's even more of an issue when you incorporate the idea of Sudan, which has agreements with the Egyptians over that access to how much water they get from the Nile, where they get their electricity from. It has been a primary, source of tension between these three countries. So with that being said, let's talk about the construction, some of the major concerns, and the output of this project. So GERD on paper, nominally, is meant to provide hydropower for all of Ethiopia's power needs. From what I've been reading, both in foreign policy, as well as others from the Atlantic Council, as well as the African report, that this is meant to be, at least according to the Ethiopian government, to provide hydroelectric power to virtually all of Ethiopia's power grid. So we're talking about, the cities, rural access, and expanding the electrical power grid for a country that is still relatively in development. This would meet all of their power needs according to their projection, which is why it's the size that it is, despite the fact that other parties have been concerned about the dam being much larger than it actually needs to be to produce power. But of course, the other aspect of it is that with this dam agreement, this would also allow Ethiopia to sell electricity to South Sudan as well as the Sudanese, which would, of course, would allow them to have cheaper electricity and make Sudan and South Sudan not as reliant upon Egypt for hydropower, electricity, and so on, which in doing so lessens Egypt's ability to influence its neighbors, which of course causes even more concern because Ethiopia is using this dam to exert power and influence in the region, something that it hasn't had in comparison to Egypt, which has historically had the backing of the United States and other Western powers in terms of North and Sub-Saharan Africa. Other reports from NPR and other geological surveys have shown that this dam may reduce flow to the Nile River by 25%, significantly affecting Egyptian farming, which, of course, the Egyptians have made it very clear, from Mohamed Morsi to Fattah al-Sisi, who's the current president now, that any sort of threat to the Nile River would be seen as an existential threat. It's vastly a great security concern. You can't get past the idea that an agricultural society without its current access to water and its ability to regulate that flow of water now being controlled by someone else, it is now immediately cause for concern, which is why we've seen a lot of saber rattling and a lot of warlike rhetoric come out of the Egyptian government these last several years. But it also comes up to the fact that Egypt, up until now, has more or less been the supreme authority when it comes to the Nile River, and primarily out of a 1929 and 1959 treaty, and more recently a 2015 treaty. So the 1929 treaty is between the English-controlled Sudan and Egypt, sort of post-war treaty of World War I, talking about Egypt's going to have power over the Nile to regulate it. The 1959 treaty gives Egypt veto power over projects that may affect flow to the Nile. It also determines how much, in terms of how much cubic, amount of water these two countries get between Sudan and Egypt. And then, of course, there's supposed to be a joint technical commission between Sudan and Egypt to go over any sort of dam project, hydroelectric plant, construction, irrigation, agricultural project, anything that would remotely affect the Nile. Sudan and Egypt are supposed to work together. And now, of course, this doesn't incorporate Ethiopia. However, this has been the long-standing political position of the Egyptians, is that, listen, we have been working since the 1920s and even more recently to have control over the Nile. This is our lifeblood of our economy. It's what keeps our agricultural sector alive. So, of course, this is a source of national security concerns. On top of the fact that in 2015, the governments of Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia had signed a treaty about the GERD project. Of course, saying that the dam would not be filled without agreements or assurances that it would not harm the flow of the Nile River to either Sudan or Egypt. And in fact, the dam itself, of course, has been moving along with its construction. And despite attempts to find a sort of diplomatic solution to it, the production of the construction of the dam has been continuing. And of course, they are beginning to fill the dam's reservoir regardless of assurances, which is why, again, Egypt sees this as a national security concern. Now, at the bottom here, I mentioned that there's Italian and Chinese support for the dam. Now, the Chinese have provided some funding for the project. However, when the dam began construction in 2011, I believe it was an $81 billion contract. No competition, no bidding process, no RFPs were sent out, but it went to an Italian company. And that's how much the bid was worth. It was 81 billion USD. And the Italians have been working on it consecutively since then. They're, at this point in time, well over 85% completion. This includes, the reservoir capacity, the hydroelectric plant itself, and making sure it has everything that it needs in order to do so. This is just a digital rendering I have on our PowerPoint slide here. But this is what the final project would look like once the reservoir itself is filled and hydroelectric power can start, being generated once everything's complete. So this is where we're at. And of course, the Ethiopians are seeing this as an opportunity to, put themselves out there on the world stage, generate themselves power, and more or less use the Nile as a means of imperialism. Essentially, you're now exhibiting influence, you are now exhibiting control, you are now putting yourself on the world stage because you are utilizing infrastructure projects to more or less affect the economic status of another country. And what a better way to do that than through water? And that's where we're at here. So let's take a look at what we've got here. Any questions so far? How long until Mossad nukes this, I wonder? I doubt that that'll happen. They do import a lot of their food already, elevation, but there's still a significant agricultural sector, and there's still a significant population of the Egyptian economy that operates on subsistence farming. So this is a major concern for millions of people, as well as the lifeblood of the Egyptian economy. Whether or not the dam collapses or not is an entirely different question, but what matters is that we're now at a point of significant political and diplomatic tensions between these three countries. And we'll get to that in a minute, Michael, about what Egypt can do about this, because there's a lot that Egypt has already done and has threatened to do. So denial over tensions and risks, pun intended. So there's been a lot of saber rattling from the Egyptians for the last several years. They've threatened conflict and war and military strikes in 2014, 2019, and more recently, the ambassador to the United States from Egypt, his name is Mortaz Zaharn, who is the ambassador. He has recently penned an op-ed in Foreign Policy magazine calling on the Biden administration to interfere and to back the Egyptians over any claims and, security concerns over GERD. The Egyptians make the argument that, the threat that GERD poses is not hypothetical, but in fact very real. Most Egyptians are currently living 50% below the water poverty line, according to the United Nations. Egypt has adopted a nationwide system of reusing water several times for agricultural, achieving one of the world's highest irrigation and system efficiencies. So any sort of threat towards, access to water would not only put lives at risk due to water poverty, but also put their agricultural sector at risk. They also claim that, it would have disastrous effects on Egypt's own hydroelectric plants, such as the Aswan High Dam, and that any, their arguments are very much humanitarian in nature towards the Biden administration in this op-ed. However, the Egyptian pundit class, as well as the Egyptian military, have come out in previous years talking about, listen, this is an existential threat. We will bomb this dam if need be. And we have no problem getting our allies involved, and we have no problem dragging the United States into this for at least diplomatic purposes. So there's this attempt to sort of draw in greater world powers involved in order to sort of back up their claim, which of course the United States, having a long history of providing military support and foreign aid towards the Egyptians, not to mention that Egypt has been sort of this linchpin in sort of U.S.-Israeli policy in the Middle East. So the United States is in this awkward position where it's like, well, we want to support humanitarian development in the region. However, we're being pulled by this ally that is essential to us in other aspects of Middle Eastern foreign policy. So there's this position where the U.S. has been heavily involved in negotiating and trying to find a diplomatic solution. So it's not that Italy is funding this, Hector. It's that there is a Italian company that is that was awarded the contract for it. So there is a bit of economic interest for the Italians to support the dam, but it's not necessarily that they're funding it or anything. It's just that there's an Italian engineering company that has the contract. The Egyptians have a good officer corps. Don't blame them for losing to the Israelis, says Hunger. Well, they have a strong military class, and they've been very adamant about this dam issue, and I wouldn't be surprised. It's not like the Egyptian military is known for their subtlety either. But Ethiopia's position, of course, in this entire sort of debate and tensions, of course, is that the dam will be completed or filled regardless of the 2015 agreement that they had on the 2015 treaty that they had on GERD, which of course brings the concern that, listen, there's a lot of pressure for it, as I mentioned in the slide. The Ethiopian government needs sort of a win. The domestic pressure fuels the need for the dam's completion, in part because in 2014, 2015, there was a lot of rioting, a lot of domestic issues over the state of the economy, a lack of access to basic resources and government services, such as healthcare, electricity, and clean water. So there's a significant pressure for the current Ethiopian government to, get this dam out there, get it completed, start filling it up, and start actually getting the power that they need, that they promised, because, of course, this has been years in the making. There's a lot of promises based on it, and they want to have the return of the people. A lot of this is funded by bond projects, so a lot of domestic dollars have gone into this, so they need to, put up or shut up. And like I said, a lot of pundits and a lot of government officials have noted that this is the similar sentiments of the Egyptian Aswan High Dam, which was a source of nationalist pride for the Egyptians back in the 1960s, and we're seeing that sort of same nationalist sentiment take place here. This is a source of national pride. This is a source of, we're going to get this done. Ethiopia is finally putting itself out there on the world stage. It's being self-sufficient. We're no longer dependent upon the Egyptians and other foreign powers. There's a sense of Ethiopian identity and growth, which, you could spend an entire stream talking about the Ethiopian identity. It's a Coptic Christian country. It was one of the only one or two African countries that sort of resisted European colonization. It wouldn't really fall to a European power until, the fascist Italy takes it over. And of course, you get the famous speech to the League of Nations. It's us today, then you tomorrow. So, there's a lot of pride that comes with Ethiopia's sort of identity in that aspect. I'm not surprised that the Ethiopians are taking such a line in the stand on this issue, and the identity alone, the national pride alone, to me makes a lot of sense. But throughout the last 3 administrations here in the United States, the Obama, Trump, and now Biden administration have all tried to facilitate talks or put diplomatic pressure on the issue to find some sort of agreement. But they have more or less failed in finding a necessary legal framework to come to an agreement where the Egyptians feel as if they have the assurances they need to survive. Now, I significantly doubt that the Egyptians will actually go forward with a military strike out of fear of American and European Union sanctions. However, I mean, keep in mind when we talked about last week's discussion on offensive realism, whenever there's some sort of security threat, power has to be projected, wealth has to be secured, and the ability to project that power is necessary in order to defend your own national interest and, by extension, your national sovereignty. So I'm not too sure whether or not Egypt will follow through. I think that the fear of sanctions may keep them at bay for a little bit, but if there actually shows in the years ahead that this dam actually does affect the Nile flow to the degree that they're worried about, I would significantly think that some sort of military option would definitely be put on the table. So let's see here. Preservatism asks, doesn't Egypt's dependence on the Nile make Ethiopia's possible retribution for attacks on the dam an outsized bargaining chip? Ethiopia seems to have the upper hand here. From my understanding of this issue, from the last week and a half, I've been doing some reading on this after I had a conversation with a Ethiopian immigrant on Twitter about it. It does to me seem that the Ethiopians do have the upper hand. If you have the ability to control the flow of the Nile in the direction, the dam is a major target, of course, but they do have the ability to put significant economic pressure and strain on Egypt. So I would argue that the dam is a huge bargaining chip in terms of any sort of political retribution. Not to mention that right now Egypt doesn't have the political support of nearby neighbors that it once thought it had. There's a big concern that once this dam is completed and in operation, that the ability to sell cheap energy to South Sudan and Sudan, countries that have been nominally on Egypt's side of the dam issue, once it loses political support of a country that it's had an agreement with since 1959, all bets are kind of off on Egypt being able to really exert any sort of influence on the area. Yes, Grim Sapphic, sip indeed, because that's what I've been enjoying, is a good cup of coffee. Who is Ethiopia allied with? So Ethiopia, from my understanding of this issue and from what I've been researching, it's not that Ethiopia is necessarily without allies or going at it alone, but this has been primarily really just a three-nation issue. I mean, yes, you've had Italian support because of the Italian government or the Italian engineering firm getting that $81 billion contract. There has been support from the United States because they want international development. They want hydropower. It's seen as sort of this green energy thing. So you've had some support from American statesmen. On top of the fact that this has sort of been other than this dam issue, these three countries have had relatively decent relations in recent years. A lot of that's been facilitated by, of course, Western development and Western interests. And then, of course, you have the Chinese involved. So there's a lot of multilateral interests in here, but it's not like the Ethiopians are going at it completely alone. But this issue, of course, does have some concern. Because keep in mind, that 1959 agreement, Egypt gets, I believe, 55.5 billion cubic meters of water, and Sudan gets 18 billion cubic meters. That allotment allows for 500 cubic meters of water per person in Egypt, so about 50% of the water poverty index as determined by the World Bank. And even Sudan has said that, you know, at least the military of Sudan has said that the filling of the dam in 2021, this summer, would be seen as a direct threat to Sudan's national security. Although the Ethiopian ambassador to Egypt, I believe his name is Marcos Tekele, he disagrees with it. He says right now the only focus, and I'm quoting him directly now, our focus now is filling and operating the dam, not about water quotas. And Ethiopia has repeatedly made clear that this day will not cause significant harm. Therefore, I don't know why it becomes an existential threat to either Sudan or Egypt right now, end quote. So you can sort of see the political posturing here where it's just, listen, the dam won't be operational really until it gets filled. That takes roughly 5 to 7 years. They began filling it last year in direct violation of the 2015 agreement that discussed, no filling of the dam without assurances. So it does say a lot about the current state of affairs. And of course, the African Union got involved in 2014 with no significant degree of success. No party has been able to put down major political frameworks or a legal framework that all three parties can agree to. And again, it comes down to the bare bones aspect that this is an existential crisis to Egypt as well as Sudan. But the idea that Sudan could be lost through cheaper electricity prices and through, energy policy puts Egypt in even more of a tougher position, and so that's why they're talking right now. Now, these conversations have been going on for a while. I know that most recently we've had the U.S. Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa, Jeffrey Feltman. This picture was just from a few days ago on May 5th. They met in Cairo, and they were trying to find a way to, meet the needs of all three countries. So far, they have not succeeded. The United States has been under a lot of pressure from both the Egyptians and the Sudanese government to find some sort of solution, but right now, there hasn't been an answer from either party involved. In fact, the other issue, of course, is that Ethiopia is building other dams, which, of course, is causing concerns in Kenya and Eritrea. And, of course, there's significant water security issues that are also being affected in Somalia because of these dams, to which, the Egyptians and the Sudanese are trying to think, well, if we can show that Ethiopia is using these access to tributaries and other water concerns and showing that as a significant threat to the livelihoods of other African countries, we may be able to frame it, at least in Western eyes, that this is a humanitarian issue, a human rights issue, and we need to operate and act immediately. However, the one thing that a lot of African countries have been utilizing in the last several years when it comes to Western intervention with these countries is the concerns of neocolonialism. You've noticed in recent trends in recent years that a lot of African countries have been withdrawing from a lot of European projects, whether it's the International Criminal Court and the Rome Treaty, saying that why is they're always going after, African leaders, African politicians, African military officials, never after, say, European or Asiatic ones that are involved in the treaty. So the concern of colonialism and race gets played a lot when it comes to sort of Western powers like the United States or European countries getting involved here. And in fact, the Ethiopian government has responded clearly in regards to Egypt's, sort of illegal claims to regulating the Nile and the flow of water and access to water and water quotas has been, why on earth is Egypt, a sovereign African state, relying on decades-old treaties that are from times of colonial powers in Africa? It seems a bit ridiculous that Egypt would be relying upon the weight of colonial legalism in order to push its agenda forward, in order to have, sovereignty and supremacy over the regulation and flow of the Nile River. And the issue is how fast it will be to fill the dam. And in fact, the reason why I thought that this subject was so interesting is because this is a ticking time bomb. The dam isn't filled. They've only started to fill the dam. They're going to require on the rainy seasons during June and July in order to fill the dam. And it's about going to take roughly 5 to 7 years, according to international and Ethiopian government estimates, which makes it something that we're watching really in a short period of time take place. We've been watching it now, about the construction of the dam, all of these projections, but now when push comes to shove, we're going to see how bad things get in the next 5 to so years when the dam actually gets filled, power starts being generated, and Ethiopia starts exerting its influence over the country. Which, of course, brings me to the subject of water wars. So we've heard this term before. It's not one that is, left to the realm of dystopian or science fiction novels. It's a very real concept. Mark Zaituna and Jared Warner of the College of London, had coined the concept hydrohegemony in 2005. It is the concept of hegemony at the river basin level achieved through water resource control, strategies such as resource capture, integration, containment, irrigation, dam building, and well building. Conflict arises over these concerns and will only increase as the population of the Earth increases, especially when we talk about North and Sub-Saharan Africa. Because if every projection on Earth has put Sub-Saharan and North Africa to be some of the largest areas of human population growth for the next 100 years. Now, that's only going to make things incredibly difficult for access to water and access to, fresh water, because only 3% of all water on Earth is fresh water. And of course, most of it is trapped in the polar ice caps in the North and South Pole. So access to fresh water, whether it's underground, through rivers, through lakes and ponds, becomes an incredibly scarce and valuable resource. And I have this map from The Economist, which came out 2 years ago, and it talks about water conflict. And you can already see in the sort of a region of Africa that we're talking about here, the Horn of Africa, right there. Look at all of that. Water is a weapon of conflict. Water is a trigger of root cause of conflict, or water and water resources is a casualty of conflict. So, and of course, right now, whether or not war breaks out over GERD remains to be seen. Like I said, the reason why I find this topic so interesting is because, one, this is going to be just a preview of the things to come as the population of the Earth increases and access to water becomes incredibly scarce. Until more advances are made in sort of portable desalination technology, these kind of conflicts are only going to increase. Ethiopia recognizes that its ability to control its own water resources, and by extension the resources of water and access to water in other countries, makes it a vital aspect to be a power player in the region. Ethiopia's military, of course, is not as strong as that of Egypt's. It doesn't receive as much military aid from foreign powers as, say, Egypt does from the United States, nor does it have access to the technical resources that it does here, which makes it, in a position to exert power and influence in other ways. And when we talked about last week in our conversation in regards to offensive realism, maximizing wealth is one of the most effective ways to do that. So by exporting electricity and influencing the energy policy of neighboring countries, you are expanding your sphere of influence in the area. Ethiopia is trying to pull away Sudan away from Egypt's sphere of influence in these 1929 and these 1959 and 2015 agreements, and trying to put another country within its sphere of influence and to have someone to back it up at the table, whether it's having conversations on the African Union or with American ambassadors and other parties that are interested and involved. It also helps that you have the Italians and the Chinese having their financial and monetary interests involved as well, which gives you significant backing of two larger power players in the immediate area, both in terms of, engineering companies and, of course, the likelihood of foreign direct investment from the Chinese or other Western parties, as we've mentioned earlier. But it is definitely going to be a population issue. Now I'm reading chat now. Desalinization doesn't even factor, since it's an elevation/population center issue. It is, but I mean, is the technology for desalinization in the last several years, to me, from my understanding, at least from what I've been researching, is indicative of the fact that it isn't developing as fast as it should be, in my opinion. And again, I think having access to water and control of that water access is going to be important. But as the population of Africa and by extension the rest of the world grows, water access and water treatment is going to be a huge issue, which is why, again, this dam issue is so important for us to understand, because it is a preview of the likelihood of political conflicts and military flashpoints in the future. So let's see here. We're also going to see a lot more conflict as America's superpower status continues to wane. Most likely. And I mean, again, this is why I find the dam issue so interesting, because it's such a multifaceted and a multipolar political issue. The United States has been involved, the Italians have been involved, the Chinese are involved, Egypt, Sudan, South Sudan, the African Union. It's a multifaceted thing. It's not just one party mandating or trying to control the narrative here. You have two very I would argue two very convincing political narratives. You have one about the concern of long-standing sort of political and regional and legal authority over the Nile, which of course affects your livelihood, trade, the economy, agricultural, etc. On top of the fact that you're having a nation trying to exert itself, put out electricity, try to power its power grid for the cities and its rural areas. It says a lot about what's to come. And of course, it is a multi-party, sort of policy. And it puts a lot involved in there. So yeah, more of these water conflicts will definitely arise, especially within the African continent. But, a diplomatic solution I think will be harder to find because there's not going to be one singular power or authority that can assert itself to find a legal or diplomatic framework to provide a solution. And so it puts, these countries in a difficult situation because there's not a singular authority or a global superpower that they can rely on, especially as the US's superpower status and its diplomatic capital in the region continues to wane. Now, this would probably be an area in which China allows itself to have more influence in the region. Keep in mind, since the mid-2000s, that China has been the largest foreign direct investor of the African continent and continues to remain so. So China will have a significant amount of soft power and probably diplomatic influence in these future conflicts as well, because this is only going to be the first of many that will arise in the next century. But I mean, again, there have been attempts to, meet with the United States and try and talk to the U.S. envoy from earlier. In fact, the Sudanese have recently met with the U.S. envoy over stalled talks. Just yesterday, according to Reuters, Sudanese official held talks with the new U.S. envoy to the Horn of Africa on Saturday, aimed at resolving the dispute over Ethiopia's giant hydropower dam on the Blue Nile. The article continues, saying talks between Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia are over the filling and operation of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and their talks fell apart last April, after an invitation by Sudan for a prime minister-level summit went unanswered. Ethiopia is pinning its hopes for economic development and power generation on the dam, which Egypt fears will imperil its water supply. Sudan is also concerned about its impact on its own water flows. Sudan and Ethiopia are also in the midst of a border dispute over the Al-Fasqa region, which Sudan says is part of an internationally recognized border, but Ethiopian farmers have been settling there for the last 30 years. The new U.S. envoy, veteran diplomat Jeffrey Feltman, says he shows a deep understanding of Sudan's position and stressed the importance of carrying on negotiations under the umbrella of the African Union with the involvement of the international community. Earlier this week, Feltman met with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who emphasized that the Ethiopian dam was an existential issue for Egypt, which will not allow its water interests to be harmed. Quote, "We'll see whether we succeed or not," says Dina Mufti, spokesman for Ethiopia's foreign ministry, when asked on Saturday about Feltman's upcoming visit, adding that his country would engage on him with relevant topics. The last round of talks failed when they were held in the Democratic Republic of Congo last April, which currently holds the African Union chairmanships, and whose president also met with Sudan's Sovereign Council head on Saturday in Khartoum. And that's the end of the article there. But that's the issue. And that's where we're at. Grim Safric, 652 million, in loans from China. Okay, nuke it, I'm anti-dam now. But again, like what I'd said, China's been the largest foreign direct investor in the African continent for decades now, almost 20 years. They're going to continue to exert influence in the area. If you want to talk about sort of the great power politics game between the United States and China, I mean, Africa is going to be sort of the new hotbed for political interest and influence in the region. However, you're playing a hard power game versus a soft power game. The United States has been primarily focused on two areas when it comes to Africa. You've had PEPFAR, which is President George W. Bush's anti-HIV/AIDS initiative, which has saved millions of lives. And then, of course, counterterrorism and counterinsurgency efforts. So whether that's fighting the Islamic State, Boko Haram, the United States has been primarily focused on humanitarian development, education, healthcare, and counterterrorism. Sort of the American private sector, so to speak, of investment in Africa is not nearly at the level of the Chinese. So you have that concern. Which, of course, the Chinese have been investing in major areas across Africa, whether that's through rare earth mineral mines, bauxite mines, hydroelectric plants, solar power, waste disposal, irrigation, farming, agricultural. And of course, this is through the benefit of the fact, right, that there is no such thing as a private company in China. They're all state-owned and operated enterprises, which allows you to utilize the economy in a way that, democratic and sort of free market or market economy-based states can't do so, because you can't mandate the market to invest in certain areas. So that this tells you a lot about what's to come in the future of African policy and African politics between the great powers. I think because of the fact that China has been so more focused on sort of direct foreign investment, trying to get the African nations off of the dollar and more on the Chinese currency, and putting them more on these infrastructure projects with great deals of investment. Of course, they come at the cost of really, really shady and shaky loans. You're in a position now where, of course, the Chinese may have more influence over African countries than, say, the West and the United States does. However, considering that many African countries and many African peoples will tell you that the Chinese probably treat them worse than probably the most racist white Europeans and white Americans do here, then it may not be something that would actually happen as so readily as we believe, or at least that I'm pontificating. In part because, of course, the way that, the Chinese treat African mine workers, they treat African governments and bully and harass and put pressure on them without any sort of, diplomatic bedside manner, is indicative of the fact that China doesn't necessarily know how to finesse or get the diplomatic pressures that they want in order to succeed and get the goals that they wish to, attain. So it could go either way, but in comparison to the two great powers, you have a hard power country like the United States when it comes to African policy. And then, of course, you have more direct influence, economic investments, and more, soft power interests like that of the Chinese. Although it does come at a significant cost because, of course, there's shady loans, forcing to devalue your currency away from the dollar and put it more towards the Chinese. So a lot of currency manipulation at hand as well. So Chinese colonialism is going to definitely be 100 times worse than the European version, as Shrouded Hills points out. And it's definitely indicative of there's going to be a lot of problems there. Sail Away says, traditionally, the banks of the Nile are fertilized by seasonal flooding. Strategies will need to be in place to negate the issue. Yeah, and that's actually one of the biggest concerns about this dam, Sail Away, is that they're going to be relying on those rainy seasons to actually fill the dam, which of course is going to affect how much water flows upward into Egypt anyways, which of course is why Egypt sees it such as an existential threat. But yeah, there's a lot of Chinese influence in here as well. Grim Safric points out in chat that they just put 1.8 billion into their energy grid as well. So there's a lot of Chinese interest and influence riding on this as well. So there's going to be a lot of problem here. A lot of issues here when it comes to, diplomatic solutions as well. The Egyptians are relying on the United States, and if push came to shove, the Ethiopians are going to rely upon Chinese money and most likely Chinese, foreign pressure as well, with that sort of monetary aspect in mind. Do any of these nations have nukes? No. Neither of these nations are nuclear-armed states. Which makes it all the more troubling because if the parties involved are not nuclear-armed states, the likelihood for traditional kinetic conflict are very likely, JD. When you have countries that are not nuclear-armed or have fissile material or have it readily accessible, then the likelihood of traditional state actor versus state actor conflict is ready. To a point where even the foreign minister of Ethiopia has said if Egypt wants to try anything, we have no problem going to war and we will rally millions to our cause. So in this essence, nukes are irrelevant. And of course, this doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of sort of Ethiopian-Egyptian tensions that have been around for, centuries really, at least since, Coptic Christianity took more of a greater stance inside Ethiopia, while of course, the reign of Dar al-Islam, or the world of Islam, from, post Muhammad's death, which took over the Middle East and North Africa up until the Pyrenees Mountains in 732. So yeah, there's a lot of concern there from 650, 670 AD onward. And then, of course, there's the concern of the Navy. Both access, of course, that area of the Horn of Africa, of course, would be a major hotspot for naval conflict. And of course, whether or not the Chinese Navy gets involved is an entirely different question from now. But what we're seeing, and the reason why I thought this topic was important for us to cover, is, of course, water hegemony is a very real term. Water conflicts are more bound to happen as the population increases. Population increases happen when we try to improve the quality of life, reduce child mortality rates, especially in developing countries, which grows the population. When there are more young people on there, they're more likely to be swayed by nationalist or more ideological sentiments, which makes the likelihood of conflict more likely. Tag in the issues that, the scarcity of valuable resources, whether that's women, in marriage and children, food, water, medicine, education. All those kind of things are driving conflicts in that area, which also can be driving ideological reasons for, extremism and radicalism. There, the concern over, say, polygamy right, the rising bride price and inflation of bride price is a valued reason why Boko Haram still exists, because they offer, monetary means and the access to women in order for new recruits to join Boko Haram. So the access to vital resources, whether that's, family, stability, a home, land, food, water, whatever, is a driving aspect of radicalism. So I would not be surprised if water in the future is used as a mechanism to recruit people towards radical extremist groups, especially as fresh water becomes more and more rare in the sub-Saharan and North African parts of the continent. Elevation. The Chinese Navy can barely project force on their neighbors, never mind Africa. Yes, but I mean, the Chinese Navy, or the Chinese government, has other ways to exert influence through foreign direct investment, shady loans, infrastructure projects, things that we've mentioned earlier. Melphis says, the origin of the Ethiopian and Egyptian hatred goes, if you want to be conservative, 639. If you want to be wild, roughly 450. I'd have to look up the 450 year. I'm aware of 639 in the 640s, 650s time frame, but I'd have to look up the 450 AD. Hector Newman says, imagine a war where the main objective is blowing up a dam. Well, I mean, it's not like the West hasn't done that before. But I mean, you want to get some Fallout New Vegas vibes, or the Battle of the Hoover Dam, and it's now the Battle of the Renaissance Dam. There you go. We've managed to get our Fallout New Vegas reference in for today, boys. Here we go. But yeah, but overall, to conclude, this is a ticking time bomb of both political, strategic, and economic tensions between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt over the creation of this dam. There's a lot of Chinese money that backs this project through and Italian interests as well. The Americans are pushed into this by the influence that Egypt has over the United States and its foreign policy in North Africa and the Middle East. Egypt is vital in that regard, so the U.S. by extension is, going to get dragged in and involved. The Ethiopians recognize that water is going to be a significant way to exert influence, especially if we believe the idea of offensive realism. You have to secure wealth in order to maintain sovereignty and to exert power. So this is why they're continuing to use dams and other forms of irrigation and farming tools in order to exert their influence upon neighboring states. Now, Sudan and Egypt are roughly close together in terms of old agreements from 1959 onward. However, the idea of, exporting cheap hydroelectric power to Sudan may offer an alternative for Ethiopia to exert influence on a country that has strategically been against them for quite some time, as well as to ameliorate border and farming disputes between the two countries. However, I would keep in mind that Sudan is still roughly economically and militarily weaker than either party involved, in part because Sudan has been fighting a conflict with the South Sudanese, mainly over oil pipelines and access to that, which makes it difficult. Important to keep that in mind. Now, a war is likely to happen. Maybe. It still remains to be seen. I don't think the Egyptians are willing to risk the loss of American support and Western sanctions over blowing up the dam, but they may do things covertly, especially if the impact that they fear that this dam will have in the coming years over the flow to the Nile River towards Egypt is actually seen. Numerous reports have indicated that it could reduce flow of the Nile River into, Egypt and lack the access to water by 25%. Which would significantly strain the economy and put millions of people's lives at stake, both within Sudan and in Egypt. So, with all that being said, this project is still ongoing. It is nearly complete. They have already begun filling the dam, which takes roughly 5 to 7 years, depending on how much water they receive and how the rainy seasons go. So, this is something that we should keep in mind when examining this subject. And as Sky Kolroth points out, yep, if war is to break out, odds are it would trigger another refugee crisis into Europe. But this, of course, is the subject I wanted to cover today, and I think that concludes today's lecture on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, a subject that has been proposed since the 1960s and 70s, finally now being completed, and now is very much raising the stakes in the likelihood of war, political tensions, refugee resettlement, and of course drought and potentially millions of lives being lost as the dam begins to fill and near its completion and construction. So, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them and answer them. I had a lot of fun doing research on this subject. It was a lot of fun reading about a topic that normally doesn't get covered in Western media and doesn't get covered in a lot of foreign policy journals unless it's, saber rattling and they threaten war. But water politics is going to be the future of a lot of geopolitical strife, tensions, and diplomacy in the future, especially as, populations grow and access to water and clean drinking water, becomes harder and harder to get access and, enjoy. Lesson of the day, don't take Chinese money. Yeah, never take Chinese money. Never, go to Epstein's private island, and never, ever threaten to release information that could implicate Hillary Clinton, because you never know where you might just end up. So there's some important lessons for everyone here today. And we got to reference Fallout New Vegas and, make fun of acid reflux. So it's been a good time. Elevation X says, you got to cover Nigeria's food crisis sometimes. Huge protests kick off all the time over there. You know what? I might make that the subject of next Sunday's stream. So why is Israel involved here? Because Egypt's involved, and because, anything that gets a country that has historically not had the world's best relationship with Israel off its back probably helps. Not to mention that the Chinese are involved, but that's a complicated question for another time. But I have something fun for you all. We're now at the end of the stream, or at least the end of the lecture, and we're not done with the stream just yet. But it is time for the Frog of the Week. I decided to take the phrase "that feel win" TFW and make it the Frog of the Week. So we replaced frog facts with the Frog of the Week. So, the frog of the week is the red-eyed tree frog. It is a nocturnal carnivore whose sticky tongue can help catch flies, crickets, grasshoppers, and other insects. It's found along the Central and South America from the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico all the way down to Panama, crossing through countries like Nicaragua and such. It has excellent camouflage, with it being such a bright and vibrant green for the tropical rainforests that it lives in. Its red eyes are a part of what is known in nature as the dymatic behavior, or startling behavior. Those bright red eyes give it the appearance that it is a predator of some sort to scare away potential predators of its own, allowing it a defense mechanism. Other examples of dymatic behavior include certain patterns on the wings of moths and butterflies that make it look like it is the eyes of a much larger creature in order to scare and ward off predators. During the mating season in spring, males tend to bulk up. They get swole, they get their gains. They gain a lot of weight in order to show off that they are the most worthy mate for potential females. And when they are, croaking and getting a hold of a potential mate, they will shake the tree branch that they're on very rapidly, and the vibrations are meant to ward off rival males so they know to look somewhere else. This spot's taken. I'm going to find somebody. And of course, according to international conservation resources, their population is listed as least concern for extinction and being endangered. However, their habitat and ecosystem is under threat due to deforestation. But that, my friends, is the frog of the week. And it is the most important segment of our online sphere, JD. You're absolutely right. That's right. That field win frog posting. That's what we're going to do. And it's important that we cover our stream, when we cover all these sort of, in-depth topics, and we try to go over sort of all these serious subject matters in terms of foreign policy, international relations, and theory. I think it's important for us to end our conversations, or at least end our discussions on a lighthearted note. So at the end of each Sunday stream, I like to, if you're new to the channel, I like to cover a new frog species, and we have it called the Frog of the Week, also known as Frog Facts. And I think it's important for us to just end this, lecture on a happy note. And for me, nothing brings me more happiness than cute pictures of frogs. So every Sunday, when you guys tune in, not only will you get a fantastic lecture on foreign policy, international relations, and geopolitics, and you'll get it from a right-of-center reactionary perspective, but you also get to look at cute animals, and nothing's cuter than a frog. So Pedro, yeah, I probably would assume that Israel would have a vested interest for Ethiopia to win out on this dispute. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on here as well. But yeah, so that being said, I'm glad that you all stopped by, all 50 of you, to take a look at what's currently going on between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. Here's our lovely little frog friend. He's about to get some water going on him. I love his tongue being out right there. It's very cute. I would greatly appreciate it all if you would like and share the stream. I know that we are doing quite well with the number of likes and shares, but if we could bump those numbers up, I'd greatly appreciate it. We're going to do just fine with the channel growth. We are well on track to making 2K by the end of the month, so I like to think that we are doing a really good job with how well we've been growing here. More frog posting is demanded. Well, Miguel, I will always have a frog post at the end of every Sunday stream, and every week it is a new kind of frog. It's a new species and new cute pictures. So every Sunday, if you stop on by, not only will you get a firmer understanding of international affairs and what's going on in the world, you will also know more about frogs. So frog posting, as well as a good international relations lecture, is here every week. So I recommend that you stop by. And yes, you could make a stream about a dam, and I'm going to make you give a damn about a dam, because this stuff is very important. And it's important for us to understand how water shapes politics and how control and access to water affects relations between two countries. And in fact, there's a lot of water politics going on right now between the United States and Mexico, particularly in the El Paso, Texas area, over access to underground reservoirs that cross between the US-Mexico border. I might do a stream on that one in the future too, because water politics is a vastly underrated aspect of international relations and geopolitics, especially amongst Western scholars, and it needs to put more attention on it. And as someone who is more, concerned about politics from a reactionary standpoint, understanding the essentials and the necessities of life, and by extension that being water, we need to put more emphasis on that when we take a look at international affairs and relations. So with that being said, I'm going to move to some channel announcements and some shilling, and then we'll wrap up for today. So I will have a new video out. It will be another episode of Real Talk. We're going to be talking about art. In this episode, we'll be talking about crowdsourced artistic projects. It's going to be a response to a video from The Good Student, who did a response to Aaron McIntyre and I talking about creation of art and the creation of, creating things that are not just political videos and takes. And he had some suggestions about visual novels that I'm going to respond to. So that real talk will be out this week. And it's even more special for y'all because I actually catch something this time on video for you all to enjoy. So be sure to tune in for that one, and I'll make sure that that's announced for you all shortly. On the 29th of this month, Prudent Reads comes back. Mr. Patriarch and I will be discussing Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. And of course, I'll be promoting his videos throughout the month about the series he's been working on, discussing the various chapters and dialogues inside of the book itself. So be sure to keep your eyes out open for that one. And that's what's going on. And then, of course, I do have some more long-form videos in the works. I am going to be talking about my ideas of what a reactionary foreign policy would look like in the framework of the nation state. So sort of a return to the Westphalian tradition. And then the other one that I'm currently working on is the politics of masculinity, sort of what did he mean by this? Oh no. I'm swimming with the fishes. No, I have bad internet where I live. It's not that no one got me. That's okay. Are we good now? Just let me know in the chat, everybody. Continue to shill. Okay, well, all right. Now that we're back, and we had a little awkward pause there due to the internet, we'll wrap things up though for this one, and we'll keep it short. It cut out from the politics of masculinity. Okay, so I'll wrap it up there though. So what we've got is I have 2 long form videos in the works. One on sort of what a reactionary foreign policy would look like in the context of the nation state. And then the other one is sort of the politics of masculinity, sort of talking about the left-right dynamics of positive role models for men and why I think it's important for you to have one, because the left obviously doesn't, especially with its intersectional framework. And we get to sort of look at BreadTube and sort of pity them with all that. More videos to come as always. And if you're interested in supporting my work, there is always Subscribestar until the monetization starts to come in. As soon as that happens, then we can become like all true YouTubers and do super chats and stuff. But until then, I have the Subscribestar here. All of the money that goes into this channel and all the hard work that y'all put in through your donations, your sharing, your watch hours, All of that goes back into this channel. I'm currently working on a merch store with some mugs, some socks, and some notepads. I'm also working to get some different profile picture ideas on Fiverr, so we're not just reliant on good old Mr. Burke. So we're growing the channel, and I'm also beginning to upload my stuff on BitChute, and I'm looking into Odyssey and Rumble for backups and to grow my presence on alt tech, because I know that with any of center and right-wing YouTuber, it never really lasts on YouTube anyways, so that's what we're going to do. So if you're interested in supporting this work and interested in, helping me learn and how to grow my stuff and improve, I'm taking a class on how to use Adobe so I can make better videos that way, so I'm not reliant on some bare bones free software video editing stuff. Everything that you guys do, yeah, I'm going to get banned. It's eventually, but I like to think that I'm not as, I'm spicy, but I'm spicy in a very erudite way where I'm very careful with how I use my words. But yeah, as someone who's on the right, getting banned is inevitable. But until then, we're going to grow our platform, and we're going to make sure that we do well out here. And all that I ask from you guys, more than donating to the Subscribe Star, more than donating via Super Chats or anything like that, is just liking and sharing the stuff. The more people that are aware that there's good stuff for international relations, there's good stuff for reactionary ideas and politics and things like that, you sharing is all I can ask for. So by liking it, sharing, like-minded friends, hey, look at this guy, he's got great content, recommending me to larger content creators like Academic Agent. I had so much fun being on Unpopular Opinions. I'd love to be back on again. You guys going out there and helping me do the work to grow is really all that I could ask for. So I'm going to continue to network. I'm going to continue to talk with more content creators because that's what helps. But you guys could also help me out with that. And if you have people that you want me to talk to or recommend that I talk to, by all means, I'm open to suggestions. I haven't said no to really anyone's suggestions yet. I've had a great time talking to everybody from Academic Agent to Yiz the Eunuch. So whatever works, I'm all for it. The more you make your videos like a college lecture, the more partial the system is biased in your favor. Well, I'll keep that in mind. But that's what I've got going on. So this has been the Sunday stream number 7. I can't believe we've been doing this for 7 weeks now. It's almost been 2 months. I'm so excited. So with all that being said, guys, more content to come. Please like and share the video. And if you're not subscribed, please do already. And with that being said, everybody, be prudent. I'll see you all next time. I love you guys. Take care.